everybody. Welcome back to the show. Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Championing Hidden Heroes podcast. As you know by now, this is all about deconstructing the habits and the mindsets of really high-performing executive support professionals. So people who we call the hidden heroes, who work behind the scenes, who do amazing things and don't often get the public recognition or don't always have their stories heard. This podcast is just all about giving those people a chance to raise their profiles, share their really fascinating stories, and give people listening some tips and hints and some tricks that they can use, and also just to be inspired about where you can take these careers, because I think there's such a misunderstanding of what these roles are and what they can look like for people. So so my guest today is Matthew Want, who is the executive assistant for Lucy Brazier, who's the CEO of, it's Marcham Publishing, isn't it? But I sort of call it Executive Secretary magazine, which is the global voice on everything to do with this profession. So I'm unbelievably excited to chat to him and hear his story. How are you doing, Matthew?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be part of this.
Thank you. I guess you're obviously used to doing this for Lucy a lot, right? Arranging for her to speak. So I know I've seen you do some speaking as well. So I'm really glad to give you another opportunity to share your story, because I think it's great, and your partnership with Lucy is one that so many people can aspire to having, I think, with their execs. How's the weather where you are? Where are you today?
So I'm based in a village called Angmering, which is about half an hour from Brighton, down south.
Okay.
The weather today is typical English weather, cloudy with rain. Unfortunately,
exactly
nothing exciting to report on the weather front today, I'm afraid.
Yeah, it's exactly the same here. And
is it? Oh.
Yeah, just really grey, and one of those grey and drizzly days where it doesn't matter what you do, but it's just grey and drizzly. And have you been based there throughout the last 5 months through lockdown?
I have, yeah. So I've lived here now for about 2 years, so I've been here for the whole of lockdown.
What's happened? How have you dealt with the last 5 months? What's changed in your life? What's it been like?
So when lockdown hit, we just come back from our event in South Africa. So we'd been back a couple of days, and I met up with Lucy and colleague Christian. We had an event coming up in London at the end of March. So we sat together and we said, look, this is getting real. We'd heard about it, but not to the extent that it was starting to come up in the news. And we said we needed to do something. So we then changed it to online, and I'll go into more about that later. But ever since we heard the word COVID-19 or coronavirus, at first we kind of thought, oh, it's not going to be anything serious. As I said, we're in South Africa, and we were talking about it saying, it's not going to be anything serious. And all of a sudden it just hit us like a ton of bricks. And luckily we've been able to adapt and to move over to the online presence, which I think really helped, and been able to keep things moving forward, not just for us, but for our audience and for people who are in our circle. They've been able to jump on the training we've been doing and also move forward.
And what about sort of like personally, how have you found lockdown and like being, obviously we're coming out of it now in the UK, or potentially heading, looking forward to things changing again, but right here, right now, a gym's open, a swimming pool's open, things are changing. Like personally, how have you dealt with sort of being at home and working from home, and that limited social interaction, and just doing everything through a screen?
Yeah, no, I mean, not luckily, however you want to word it, I work remotely probably about 95% of the time, unless I'm traveling or meeting up with Lucy. So that side of it was quite similar. The one side I found quite difficult at first is, for those of you that might not know, years and years ago when I was 1 and 3, I had I had 2 liver transplants when I was younger.
Wow.
So as soon as the lockdown hit, I got a letter through the post saying that I'm on the highly vulnerable list.
Wow.
So for about 12 weeks, I was indoors. I wasn't allowed to go out walking. I wasn't allowed to go out to the shops. I could go in my front garden and back garden, but that was it. So for the first 12 weeks of lockdown, I was pretty much, and my wife, unfortunately for her, I did feel bad, and then for her, she couldn't go out either, just in case, wherever she went, she might have touched something or caught the virus. So we were indoors for 12 weeks,
Wow.
and that was really tough. And I tell you, when I first went out for a walk, it's like I've never been walking before. It was amazing. I only went around the field, around the back of my house, but it was absolutely amazing. But
I mean,
just, yeah,
that's unbelievable, because, as you say, that there's remote working and then there's remote working in a pandemic, which is
yeah,
totally different, right? So you're like coming to us from the future almost,
yeah.
but I think in that must have been really scary, sort of like getting that letter and thinking, God, I'm not allowed to leave
Yeah.
my house for 12 weeks. Wow, gosh.
Yeah, definitely. Especially as there are other people who were getting the letters and still going out and things like that. And we were really lucky that we had, we've got family down the road, and our next door neighbours have been amazing, and they were going to get us food and things like that. So we were quite lucky in that respect. But it was just the fact that, we couldn't go out. We couldn't, I mean, obviously during that time, people couldn't have people over, but we couldn't see people. We couldn't see family. And also at that time, we found out literally just, I think it was a couple of days before lockdown hit, that my dad had throat cancer. He was going through his treatment. They're based up by Heathrow, which is about an hour and a half from where we are. And so that was tough as well, not being able to go and see people when ideally you really needed to. And it was a struggle,
Wow.
but it was a real learning curve. And I think it was, it was an experience that I don't want to not go through it again, because I found it quite, as I'm sure a lot of people did, found the world a lot more peaceful when lockdown was happening.
Mm.
And I understand what the reason was, and it wasn't obviously a good reason at all, but the amount of changes that happened to the world were amazing during the time. Down the road from me, about 10 minutes away by the beach, people would see dolphins in the water,
Wow.
which is
God.
just absolutely amazing.
I think, well, Matthew, first of all, I didn't know that about your father. Thank you for sharing that, and I'm so sorry to hear that. That's an unbelievable thing to actually have to deal with as well during this situation. It just goes to show your mental resilience, and something that I'm really hoping to explore further, because when it rains, it pours, right? Like, life has a way of doing that to us. It's never one thing; it's always a million things at once. And it sounds like you've obviously used that time in the best way that you possibly could to get through it. And I totally agree with you on the peaceful side of things. It's where I live, we have planes normally going over our head, every minute, and not having those is just, I've heard the birds tweeting, and no dolphins in the Thames, but definitely the birds, which has been so lovely. But I think for so many people, they've loved working from home. They've loved the flexibility that is offered, and obviously this pandemic's shown that it is possible, right? To so many businesses, even those that were totally anti it before. And you were obviously doing it before because of your role was truly global, so it didn't matter where you were. But it is different, right? Like working from home in normal times where you're still allowed to see people, to working from home in a pandemic where you can't, right? They're totally different working from home situations. And I guess you've had experience of both, so
Definitely. I think it's working from home is a level of trust. And I think working from home during a pandemic is a whole other level of trust. When you're working from home, most of the time you will meet up with your executive maybe once a week or whatever it might be. And I think with the pandemic, people may not have seen each other for months. So that is a completely different level of trust. And I'll talk about the level of trust with myself and Lucy in a bit, but it's one thing we have built over the years is the level of trust. And I don't think if we had that trust between us, we wouldn't be able to do the remote working.
I mean, imagine starting a job like this, I think, and that's where I guess like a virtual assistant has had that experience and before, but you've got to build that trust so quickly, haven't you? If you're in this type of setting, because, in some cases, some of the people we've been placing in jobs over the last few months, they haven't actually met the people they're working for at all in person. It's all been through Zoom.
Definitely. I've heard a lot of stories of that where people have gone, obviously they can't go in person for interviews, but they've been doing over Zoom and they've got the jobs and stuff. And it must be weird in a respect, because the person you're working with, but you don't really know them, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
haven't had that in-person interaction with them and your colleagues yet. So that's going to be, I don't know when it might be, over the next few months, maybe, or end of the year, whenever people can start to get back into the office spaces. That's going to be a whole new learning curve. And there's also going to be when we can come back in to meeting people properly, if you like, there's still going to be that anxiety or nervousness around people because it's still going to be out there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an extrovert. I'm someone who absolutely gets there. You know, I'm an extrovert. I'm a high I on my disc profile. Like, I love people. I get my energy, and from people. Very social being. And I'm sort of a bit socially awkward now when I meet people for the first time. I'm a bit like, hello. I don't really know what to say. So it's changed. I'm finding we've spent so long not being near people that as we're slowly starting to introduce people back into our lives, it takes a little bit of time to get used to actually meeting someone in person again. And I actually had a really funny situation yesterday where I met someone for the first time in person who I've spent a lot of time talking to over Zoom, and both of us just thought we'd met each other before in real life, but we hadn't. We'd only ever spoken over Zoom, so that was a curious experience.
I think a lot of it at the moment as well is, I was finding this with family and friends when I was speaking to them through lockdown. Because everyone's been in the same situation, there's not a lot to talk about.
Yeah. What have you been up to? Nothing.
Exactly. Yeah, we found that so many times. I'd be on the phone to someone, I'd be like, "Oh yeah, how are you? How are you?" And they'd be like, "What you been up to?" Indoors. What have you been doing? And it's yeah.
Going for a walk.
Exactly, yeah. It's just one of those things, isn't it? But I think in time that will slowly start to even out. Now people are going out a bit more, and more normality is coming back into play, if you like.
Absolutely, it definitely will, and I'm looking forward to that, because whilst I absolutely 100% agree and believe that employees should be given the trust and flexibility to work how they want to work, I think as humanity, as a human race, we need social interaction, and the sooner we can get back to having that as well as the flexibility, then I think we're on for a really, that's a good thing for the world. Although there are also challenges with that, which I won't go into now, but in general terms, I think it's a good thing. But well, yeah, I mean, I guess, Matthew, what I think the listeners would love is just to know a bit more about you, and your general awesomeness and experience and your unique story, because I'm a big fan of championing people with different backgrounds and making the most of people's transferable skills, and looking at diverse, if you really truly want diversity in your organization, hire diversely, and that doesn't just mean like racial and demographic diversity. It means like experience and what people have done before, and your background is not, it's different, right? So I'll let you tell your story rather than me doing it. So over to you. So tell who are you, Matthew?
So as I mentioned before, when I was 1 and 3, when I was born with a rare illness called biliatresia. And that's all to do with your liver and to do with the bile ducts. And cut a long story short, at the age of about 1, my parents were told that I needed my first liver transplant. Wow. So I obviously had that. Stayed in hospital for about the first 3 years of my life. A couple of years later, after the first liver transplant, sadly, my body rejected liver, and I had to have another one. So at the age of 3, I had my second liver transplant, and touch wood, it's kept since. And I'm on a few groups on Facebook and things like that, and I hear stories of people, who are going through the transplants and the process now, and it's not something I would want to have to go through again. I think it's a gift that I've been given, and I definitely want to, keep it with me for the rest of my life. As I got a bit older, obviously I started to go through school and things like that. Found it a bit difficult growing up. Faced some bullying when I was younger because of the liver transplants. I had something called biliatresia, which turned my skin yellow and unfortunately discolored my teeth.
Right.
So when I was at school, I was unfortunately bullied for that. But as I've got older, I've learned to, not let that stuff affect me, get through that.
I mean,
Fast forward about,
that's some education. I mean, that's
yeah,
a serious lesson in resilience, isn't it? That not most kids aren't going to have to go through
yeah,
what you went through in that early life. I mean, that's quite extraordinary.
yeah, definitely. I think it's one of the things that, you know, when you're young, you don't really know the impact of things, if that's the way to put it. And it's not till you're older that you look back and you think, wow, you know, it's these things have affected my life. You know, as I said about the bullying with my teeth, and I did have them worked on a few years ago, and I had veneers put on them because I hated the way it looked, and that was because of bullying. But I've, horrible as it sounds, you know, obviously these people were horrible to me as I was younger, but it's made me the person I am today. And it wasn't nice to go through at the time, but I wouldn't be who I am today without it.
Yeah,
I'm not
it's
saying
so.
bullying's right in any way. Obviously, no bullying is right.
No, of course not. But I think ultimately it's how you learn from these experiences, isn't it? You know, you either let them define you, or you take the lessons and you use them to propel yourself forward in whatever way that you can, because that's all we can do in life. You know, we can't control what other people will do and say. We can only control what we do with that, you know, and how we react and how we choose to deal with it. And it's really inspiring that you've used that to build this resilience and this mindset, and you recognize that without that you might not have those same attributes right now.
Exactly. And, you know, they say, you know, what happens makes us who we are. And unfortunately, some of it is bad, and hopefully some of it is good for you. And we wouldn't be who or how we are today. You know, there's always a path laid in front of us. We don't know what it is yet. And there's always going to be bumps in the road, but you just need to keep going, and eventually you'll get where you need to get.
Yeah, yeah.
So, sorry.
I don't know where to go next. I'm normally like, you know, I've obviously been interviewing my whole life, but I was like, you know, when you hear stories like that, you can't just, I don't know, you know, you can't just go, right, and then what did you do next?
Well, I can fast forward a couple of years if you want, you know, talk about when I went through college and things like that.
Well, I guess, like, what did you know what you wanted to do growing up? Because there's so many people, especially right now, they're in this absolute limbo period. They've got no idea what they want to do with their lives. And, you know, social media and the mainstream media, you know, it's all like, you should know, fulfill your purpose, you know, and all of these things. And I think it's must be quite intimidating for people. So what was your sort of initial thinking in life? Like, where were you planning on going initially, and what are you doing?
Yeah, I think when I was younger, I probably had the dream that most young boys want to have, which is that I wanted to be an astronaut or a Jedi from Star Wars or something like that. And as I got older, I thought obviously Jedis aren't real, so I can't do that. Astronaut I kind of phased out of. And when I finished school, I went on to college and I did media studies for a couple of years. And I really wanted to get into be an event producer or a media producer. And where I used to live in Shepperton, they obviously had the studios and things like that, but there wasn't a great deal of options, if you like, potential to get into that event side of thing at the time.
Right.
I wasn't finding. So what I did is when I finished college, I thought, right, there's not a lot around here. What I'm going to do is take the bull by the horns and start doing some fundraising events off my own back. So over the period, probably about 2 or 3 years, I did a couple of events for the British Liver Trust and Cancer Research.
Amazing.
And it was just quiz nights. I managed to raise about £10,000 to £15,000 over the years.
Wow.
So that was something I did off my own back with help of
Yeah.
other people around me. And it was a lot of fun. During that time, I also bought a taxi business with my dad, which we run locally. So I was doing that. I was also working at a garden centre part-time. So
Keeping yourself busy then.
exactly, yeah, I wasn't very green-fingered. I'm still not green-fingered to this day, but it was a job. You know those jobs when you grow up, it's great to have it and things like that. And then go back to about 10 years, I would have been 21.
Yeah.
I was working with my dad in the taxi office, and it was one evening I was manning the phones. And Lucy came in off the train. I remember it was a Thursday evening, I want to say.
Yeah.
And she'd just come from an event in Richmond. And Lucy was living in Shepperton at the time, around the corner from where I was living. And we got chatting. And funnily enough, she knew my dad from years ago.
Oh, wow.
And we got chatting, and she was asking what I want to do. And I said, look, I'd really like to get into events. I've done this, this, and this. And she said, oh, I do events. I can get you into it. Let's stay in contact. And me and Lucy laugh about this. She left the office, she got in a taxi. I thought afterwards, I don't know who that woman is. I'm probably never going to see her again. I think she's a bit crazy for saying that, and didn't think anything else of it. A couple of months later, there was a meeting for our local Chamber of Commerce. So the Chamber of Commerce before us had disbanded, and they were looking for new volunteers to come on and take on the roles. I was there and Lucy was there, and we both put forward to be secretary on the local Chamber of Commerce. So this happened in, I want to say, the October or November of that year. And in the December of that year, they had a Christmas event, which was, for any of you that may know Shepperton, they have a tree which is probably about 3 or 4 stories tall. They used to have a little truck that was under there. They have people from the local schools and things like that sing Christmas carols, and they'll probably have 500 people that would attend, under this tree, and they'd all sing carols. So me and Lucy sat down and we thought, right, next year we're going to really blow it out the sky. We're going to make it something completely different. A year later, it came to the time of the Christmas event. We had the truck under the tree. We also had about 30 different stalls. We closed off the high street. We had real reindeer, we had snow machines, and we had 8,000 people down that high street.
Wow, God.
So we really grabbed it and just completely flipped it on its head and just made it happen. It was, I believe it's still running as it is today. I'm not sure how it will be this year after certain circumstances, the current situation and things like that. But after that, Lucy had the magazine at that time, I think for about a year, as it is now. And she said to me, look, do you want to come on board 2-3 days a week, just do some admin for me, just starting to travel a bit, and things were starting to get a bit overwhelming. So I said, yeah, sure, let's do it. It'd be great to get into that side of things, start to learn the ropes with the events.
And that was about 9 years ago?
8 years ago. So that would have been, what we now, 2012. Yeah, 2012.
Cool.
So I started end of February, early March 2012. And I remember the first day I worked with Lucy, if I'm all right to tell the story. It's nothing bad, it's just a funny story. We used to work out of Lucy's house because it was just me and Lucy. We didn't have an office, but she had a big house in Shepperton, so we had the back room, which was the office. And at the time, the magazine, we had probably about 600 subscribers at the time. And what we used to do, since we didn't have somewhere that would send out the magazines, we would sit there and we would put them in envelopes.
Right.
So we'd do that and print off all the addresses and things like that. And I remember it was my first day. I was printing off the envelope, printing off the addresses and things like that. And I'd done the spacing wrong on the addresses. So they weren't matching up with the windows. I think they were just slightly above it. So in my infinite wisdom, I sat there and I thought, right, I'm going to fold just the edges of the paper and, put them back in. So we packed them all up with the folded edges, got down to the post office, and it turns out I'd folded them a little bit too much. So they were now falling below the windows. So we then had to go back and repack all of them. And at that point, I thought Lucy's going to get rid of me now. It's done. That's it. And yeah, I'm still here. So obviously, envelope packing may not be my strong suit, but yeah, it obviously was enough to, Lucy obviously saw something in me, and I'm still here today.
And I guess being Lucy's executive assistant, must have some, it must be absolutely amazing just to the sheer, she's an absolutely incredible visionary, and, working with her must have so many amazing pluses. But equally, I guess, working for someone who is like the global voice on this industry as their executive assistant must come with a certain amount of pressure.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it's very tough. It's, the first year, so when I was working for Lucy part-time, I worked for Lucy part-time. I think it was about a year or so. And then it got to a point where Lucy said, look, you're pretty much working with me every day, come on full-time and we'll go from there. So that's when I became a personal assistant instead of doing an admin assistant, if you like. Yeah. So the first year, Lucy did, 170 events in 40-something countries.
Even heck.
And it wasn't until I got to the end of the year, you know, someone said to me, "Oh, you know, you must be good at this travel planning stuff for Lucy not to go anywhere wrong or, you know, end up in the wrong place." And I thought, yeah, I mean, like I said, I worked in a garden centre before. I'd done fundraising events. So I had no real training in the assistant side of things. I self-taught everything I know myself, you know. Obviously, we're lucky enough with our executive secretary live events around the world that I get to sit in on the training, and having Lucy as a role model as well, I get to pick things up. A lot of the stuff, I'd probably say 90% of the stuff that I do within my role, I have self-taught myself.
And do you remember a moment where you literally were like, I have no idea what to do. How am I going to do this? Have you had many moments like that?
Yeah, definitely. I've had times when I sit there and I think, how do I do that? And because, you know, Lucy's always said, look, if you've got a question, just ask. And, you know, we've got our LinkedIn group and things like this. And obviously people always post on there, you know, how do I do this? How do I do that? But as I'm working for Lucy and as obviously part of the magazine, it doesn't feel right for me to post on the group.
No.
How do I do this? How do I do that? So yeah. I'll go off to good old Google and I'll ask Google or watch videos on YouTube how to do it. And yeah, there's been a few times when I've sat there and I've thought, how am I here? How am I still doing this? And I think everybody has that, you know, we're our biggest own critics, no matter what it is. And I think having that confidence and having the drive to go that extra mile to know that I can do it, I just need to spend that time researching it a bit more. It's not just I can't just run into it, get it wrong, and then it all goes up in the air. I like to, as I'm sure most assistants do, I like to make sure it's correct. And that's not to say that I don't make mistakes, because everybody makes mistakes, you know. I own up to my mistakes when I make them, and I think that's one key thing as well. If you do ever make any mistakes, just own up to it. You know, that's how we built the level of trust. If I made a mistake, I've gone to Lucy and said, look, I've done this. I've corrected it now, or I'll go back and correct it. And she'll go to me, yeah, thank you so much for saying it. So I think that's an extra thing to definitely build that level of trust, especially now when we're working remotely so much.
And obviously, as you say, sort of having exposure to just sort of such, you know, a high level of professional, you know, speakers and training, and, you know, coordinating them and organizing those events, you're going to just be naturally soaking up all the best tips that they're offering, and utilizing them in your role as well, which is just amazing, you know.
Definitely, I think it's one. I'm quite lucky. Without sounding big-headed, and a few people have said this, you know, I've probably got one of the biggest networks in the world with assistants that I know from events and from all the other trainers around the world. And I'm quite lucky that I can go out and reach out to that network if I do need anything. And I think it's one thing with a network is a lot of people see the value of it, but there's some people who unfortunately only reach out to their network when they need something.
Yeah, I think, and we're actually, interesting that you say that, we're hosting a webinar on Wednesday, specifically to just to make people understand that, you know, personal branding is about networking, which helps you be better at your job, you know. And that's, I think, assistants generally are so good at facilitating things, and if they don't know, seeking the answer. But I don't think they don't view it as that being like, oh, that's just kind of something they do. They don't view it necessarily as an essential part of their job, when actually it really is, you know. It really, really, really is an essential part of your role, is to network with other assistants and other people and learn what they're doing, and take those things and implement them in your role if you think that they would work between you and your exec.
Definitely. I mean, when you go networking, you're not just representing yourself, you know, you're representing your business as well.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be someone out there that knows something you don't know, or vice versa. And it's great to have that network, you know. You connect with one person, say they're connected to 2 more people, you can connect with them, and it's like a spider's web. You know, it just goes on and on and on and on. And talking of networking, sorry, I'm just rewinding the time a bit. When I was on the Chamber of Commerce with Lucy, I was on the Chamber of Commerce for about 5 years, and I did a lot of networking locally. And because of that, I run for local council at the time. Unfortunately, I didn't win. The people in the area weren't necessarily fond of the party I ran for.
Right.
So, but it was an experience, you know. I never would have thought in a million years that I would have run. How old was I at the time? 21, 22, I think, when I run for council.
Yeah, that's pretty bold and brave.
Yeah, definitely. And but my network, I never would have thought when I started networking it would have taken me that far.
No, that's incredible. And I think you've obviously got a commercial sort of entrepreneurial, go out there and make it happen approach, which is amazing. And I can understand why you and Lucy work so well together. And obviously you have been working with her now for 8 years. And what do you think you bring to the relationship, and how do you make sure that she achieves what she wants to achieve? And at the same time, how do you make that mean that you're also fulfilling what you want to achieve?
I think definitely, I mentioned it again, the level of trust. I think that's one thing we've had from day dot. As I said, there's always been times when, or not always, sorry, there's been times where I may have got something incorrect or I might have missed something. But having that level of trust is key to any relationship and helping your executive do and get what they need to get. I think really knowing the person as well. I think the fact that me and Lucy knew each other before we started working exec together really helped as well, because we built up that relationship beforehand. We knew what worked, both of us, and as you go on, obviously you learn more things about each other. I think being an assistant, you've got to be there. You've got to make sure that you're knowing what your boss wants as well. I think that's a big thing. Lucy will, as you said before, Lucy will come to me with 100 ideas. And I'll say to her, right, out of those 100 ideas, what do you think are going to work? And what to you are your priorities? As a business, we obviously need to earn money, but there are things we do that are going to earn other people money. So, for example, we run a charity called Sipo, which helps girls and boys in South Africa, in the townships, get into work, become an assistant. So, for example, before they go through and do this program, in South Africa, the general wage is probably, I think it equivalates to about £2,000 to £3,000
a year, or
a year.
Wow, God!
Once they've gone through the process with the SIBO, you're looking at probably about £20,000 to £25,000 a year.
Wow!
And we've had girls on the course who their parents have left, so they've been looking after the kids, their brothers and sisters, and it's just things like that. And I'm sorry, I'm diversing a bit of course.
No, it's just, that's fascinating to know. That's where the global reach and the global network is just unbelievable. Look at what you guys can do with such a global reach. What a difference you can make.
Yeah, and it's great. We see them each year when we do our event in South Africa, and it's great to see them grow. I think we're on the third or fourth year now. So it's great to see them, and obviously we get a different scholarship or a group each year, which is brilliant. But knowing what Lucy really wants to make work, I think, is definitely key. It's different for all executives. The amount Lucy travels, and obviously over the last few months that hasn't happened, but when Lucy's traveling, it's key to know what works and what Lucy needs to see. So we've got an email triage system. We do have a document available. So if you'd like a PDF document, which is the email triage system, explains how that works. You can email me after this if you would like a copy. I'm happy to send that to you. We have a system, a 5-folder system, where, so for example, when I took over Lucy's inbox 5 years ago, I want to say, she had I think it was just under 50,000 unread emails in that inbox. So I spent a week going through them, and I said to Lucy, look, this just isn't going to work. It's not going to work. So what we did is we agreed between us, we put all the emails in that inbox into a folder called Past Help.
Yeah.
And we said, if there's anything that's really urgent that we might have missed, if people really want to, if they want to reach out to us, they'll come and reach out to us again. So we then implemented the 5-folder system, which is, this isn't in the correct order, but we've got one that's called Dealt With. So if there's emails that myself or Lucy have gone back to, we'll put that in the Dealt With system.
Yeah.
We have the FYI, for your information folder. So if something comes in, if it's something I think Lucy should see, but she doesn't need to action it, we'll put it into there. We then have the This Week folder. So if something comes in that needs to be dealt with this week, it'll be put into there. We then have the Today folder, which is stuff that Lucy needs to see today. So if someone's chasing for something that needs to be sent over today, I put that in there, and Lucy knows when she's traveling that that's the folder she needs to look into. She doesn't need to go traipsing through all the other folders to look and see what's there. Also, on a daily basis, I'll look at this week, the folder, and move anything this week up into today. So Lucy only knows that she needs to look into today. She does, you know, when she's on a plane or something, she will look through dealt with and FYI, just in case there's something I've maybe missed. Then the fifth folder is a nice, easy one, which is delete, or things I think we should delete. So if stuff comes in, you know, you get your spam and things like that. I just put it into delete, so it's just completely outside how I mind, if you like.
And was that something that you guys developed together?
Definitely, yeah. So it was an email system that was around, and we implemented it to work for both of us. So, you know, there's several email systems. At first, we were using the traffic light system, which I'm not sure if you've heard of with emails. Yeah. No. So we're using that just in case anyone doesn't know. It's so green is something that doesn't need to be dealt with straight away. Amber or yellow is something that doesn't need to be dealt with straight away, but it needs to be dealt with in the near future. And red is something that needs to be dealt with pretty much straight away. We had that system, but as the business grew, we just found that it wasn't working as well. There was too much coming in, and it was just, if you like, creating a backlog.
Hmm. And do you manage, and when you're managing Lucy's inbox, is that like the first inbox you check, or do you check your own first?
So what I do is I'll go for mine to have a look, and then I'll look at Lucy's before I answer any emails in mine.
Yeah.
Just to see if there's anything Lucy might have gone back to or anything like that beforehand.
Yeah. And you also, as well as being Lucy's EA, you also run all the events, right? And organise them all.
Yeah, so I run all the preparations for the delegates and the venues and things like that for our events around the world. I'm also lucky enough I get to travel to all of them as well. Obviously, over the last few months, we haven't had that. But yeah, I get to travel, and it's quite, especially, I think one of the hardest ones we had last year was we had one in New Zealand, in Wellington and Australia, literally back to back. And I think Lucy did about 10 trips within a week before those events. So I was planning all the stuff for Lucy, as well as doing the organisation for those two events. And that was pretty strenuous.
And how have you learned what you think Lucy will think is like really urgent and important?
I think it's just picking up. I think it's just over the years I've learned what works for Lucy. You know, if it's someone who comes through to us and says, you know, can you send me this? It might be something I can do, but if it's something, there's certain things that are obviously confidential as well that only Lucy should be dealing with. You know, one thing I always do as well is, and Lucy's happy with this, I always, when in the morning when I go through Lucy's inbox and put in the emails where they need to go, I always look into her sent items, because that gives me a really good idea of what Lucy's up to, what she's been doing, and if there's anything I can take on as well. So it also really helps me to see how the business runs. You know, if there's certain things going on, if there's projects coming up that Lucy may have not spoken to me about yet, I can look, I can see, I can be like, oh, that's happening on that date. That's great. Maybe I need to put that in the diary, or Lucy needs to send that by that date. You know, it's just great to have that extra eye, extra angle on things that are happening.
God, I'm always, you know, my brain just doesn't think in that way. So I'm always just so fascinated by, you know, people who can, you know, take information and do it for someone else. You know, I think it's really amazing skill. And as well as doing everything else that you do, no wonder no wonder Lucy needs you and depends on you so much. And as I said, it must be so, you know, you really are under the spotlight being her assistant. And I know you've had, you know, you've done talks before, and I know you've won some awards, right?
That's
as
right,
well,
yeah.
for your work. And do you, and how much do you think that's helped you in your role? And has it made any difference in how, you know, like Lucy perceives you or the world perceives you, do you think?
Definitely. I think it's helped tremendously. I think being a male assistant as well has really helped. You know, I haven't met many male assistants around the world. When we were in South Africa back in February, we had 8 or 10 there. And that's the most I've ever seen in one event, you know. And I think being a male assistant as well, I've had other male assistants come to me and say, look, you're really, you know, shining a light within the industry. You know, you've helped me to come into the role, and find my own feet, if you like. And I know there's other male assistants out there which are doing the same, which is absolutely brilliant. I think.
Why do you, I'm just always curious about this, because for us in this industry, obviously diversity means trying to attract more men.
Yeah.
Why do you think it has typically been more female dominated as an industry?
So back before World War One, it was actually mainly men that did the administrative tasks. And then when World War One hit, all the men were shipped out to war. So the women came in and they took on the roles. And ever since then, it's kind of stayed that way. You know, it was just before World War One, it was completely different. And since then, women have kind of, they took over from the men when they went out to fight. And it just kind of stayed like that. I think one thing, and I've spoken to a lot of people about this, is you find with this industry, it's a caring industry, isn't it? You know, you've got to have a certain type of personality to be able to do this role. And I think that's one thing that you find a lot of industries, so nurses and babysitters and things like that, you find it's predominantly women because they have those characteristics. I'm not saying men don't, you know, I'm not saying that at all. I think as well, when I started within this industry, I told my friends what I was going to be doing. And they just looked at me and said, oh, that's a girl's role, isn't it? You know, and I think the problem is it's stereotyped that way as well. And we really need to break down those boundaries and show men that they can do it. You know, we have the same skill set as women. You know, just because you're a man or a woman doesn't mean you can or can't do a job. You know, this is the modern day. This is the 21st century. You know, anyone can do anything.
Absolutely. And I think historically the issue has been around it not being seen as perhaps as a career. And
Definitely.
I know that Lucy's doing a lot of work globally around, you know, what is the career path and what it looks like and what it could look like. And I think that will really help as well, sort of just, you know, professionalizing the career and making it see. But it's like a lot of things, like recruitment's the same. You know, it's not something that you're told about at school or at university. Did you know that there's this whole, you know, career which is in recruitment, or, you know, there's a career as in executive support? You know, it's just not something that people talk about. And it's a shame, because, you know, for most people, like for example, recruitment has some parallels here. It's what you make of it. You know, it can be a very traditional, you know, role, or it can be what you make of it. If you're prepared to stick it out and grow and educate yourself, and you can develop the role laterally. And I think what we need to do is obviously develop the role, obviously, as a ladder, so that it's clear where the progression is. But equally, that doesn't mean that your role can't encompass so many things if your title, let's say, doesn't change, you know?
Definitely. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. You know, it's no longer just a job, it is a career. You know, when the recession hit, all the middle management was taken out, and assistants have found that they're doing a lot more now than just booking meetings and, you know, doing typing and things. I'm not saying that's stereotyping the role. Please don't think that for a second. I think ever since the middle management was taken out, assistants have been put into those roles. You know, they do events, they do a lot more than they would have ever done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if you agree, but I think this pandemic has opened up even more doors for assistants to get even more seats at the table and opportunities to speak and put themselves forward for roles that are more, you know, or I would say sort of duties and projects that are more commercial and even more valuable to the business.
Definitely, yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. I think it's also with the extra level of trust from people working at home. You know, the executives have been able to see that their assistants are capable of doing the work. They can do more. And I'm not saying all executives didn't think that originally, but I think there's a lot out there that probably thought that.
Yeah, there is still a bit of a perception problem, you know, that we have to work on and change. And that's down to the assistants themselves, and it's down to listening to people like you. And it's also down to, you know, the execs realizing the power of their assistant, and if they're harnessed and utilized in the right way. And I think that's something that all of us just need to continue championing, and, you know, and pushing out those messages so people can see that they can get their assistants to do so much more, and it's better for everybody.
Definitely.
You know,
I mean, we speak to so many executives and assistants who say that they don't give access to their assistants, don't get access to their executives' inboxes. And we say, how are you going to learn what's happening with the business? How are you going to learn what's happening with your executive?
Yeah.
You know, it's such a crucial, just things like that. And hopefully during this time, executives have started to think, people who think that way have thought, oh, I can trust my assistant to that extra level.
Yeah,
Pass that on to them.
and that's the great thing about artificial intelligence. It's such a great tool that will enable assistants to let go of, you know, some of the slightly more repetitive tasks that can be taken up by computers. And that doesn't mean that you need to be taken over by a computer. You need to use those tools to give you more time to therefore be able to support your execs even better with other things that interest you, or, you know, as well. So it's all down to training, which is where you guys come in, which is great. But it is also down to curiosity and not being prepared to just sort of sit and accept, and actually, you know, thinking, how much more can I do? What else can I do? How much more value can I add? You know?
Definitely. I think even if you've got an idea, go to your boss and say, look, I've come up with this idea. I think it's going to save us time. It will help you. Even if you say, can we try it for a month, for example? You know, what's the worst that's going to happen if it doesn't work? You go back to the old way.
I think so many people are afraid of hearing the word no, aren't they? You know, I think
exactly.
That's the big.
You never know unless you ask. You know, that's the thing with Lucy. If I think maybe something's not working how it should be, or I think we can do it a different way, I'll go to Lucy and say, look, I don't think that's working. Can we try it this way? And if it doesn't work, we can go back to it. And 9 out of 10 times, I'm lucky that Lucy will say, sure, trust you, go for it, do it how you want to do it. If it doesn't work, we can just go back to the old way.
Yeah, I always think giving them the option of coming back is a great way to sort of lessen the fear of change.
Definitely, yeah, and being proactive, that's a huge thing with being an assistant. You know, your manager's not got time to sit there all day and say, right, I need to do this next, I need to do this next. Look at what's coming up, look at what they're doing, and think, oh, always think 2 steps ahead. So, for example, when Lucy goes to events, there was a big conference out in the States last September, APC conference. And they have about 2,500 assistants there. And they had, I think it was about 50 speakers, I think. It might have been less, but it was a high number. What I did is when we got the agenda through, I went on Lucy's LinkedIn, I connected with every single speaker, sent them all a message saying, hi, I can't wait to see you at APC conference in, I think it was New Orleans. It'll be great to see you speak if I get a chance. If not, it'd just be great to connect. And the amount of connections Lucy made at that event, the amount of people that came up to Lucy and said, oh, it was great to connect with you, you know, the amount of business we did through doing that, just thinking those 2 steps ahead to do that. And Lucy didn't even ask me to do that. I just went ahead and did it off my own back.
Were you scared, or you just knew she would appreciate that?
I knew it was the sort of thing she would appreciate. You know, I do it for a lot of events, and obviously this year's been a bit different because we haven't had the in-person events. But all the big events that Lucy goes to now, once I get the agenda, I'll go through it. And there are some speakers, you know, that Lucy already knows. So I'll connect with the ones that she doesn't know. And the ones that Lucy does know, I'll just send them a quick message saying, oh, I've just seen you on the lineup for APC. It'll be great to see you there. Hopefully we can catch up. You know, just reaching out, because Lucy is a big advocate for social media. So doing that is, if you like, taking things out of the box and putting it 10 steps ahead, if you like.
What do you so you sound, you know, from the outside it sounds like you've got everything under control and that you're absolutely nailing it. To make people feel less, you know, rubbish. What's like the worst thing that you've ever done, and how did you, that you can share, and apart from stuffing envelopes incorrectly, and how did you deal with it? Like, what happened?
I remember a few years ago, I think it was, I can't remember what it was, 3 years ago maybe, Lucy was going to the States for an event, and I can't remember whereabouts it was, but there was an internal flight that needed booking. So I booked the internal flight, booked nothing else of it, confirmation came through, it came through on the wrong date. And I thought, oh God, here we go. Okay, so I had to call up the airline. You know what it's like trying to get through to airlines on the phone. So I got through to the airline, changed it, Anyway, turns out that, again, it now come through at the wrong time. So after spending an afternoon, I got that sorted. But apart from that, touch wood, I've been quite lucky. There's not really been anything that I can think of the top of my head. We've had situations with visas and things like that. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, you've come back. Sorry, just
that's right.
Broke up for a bit.
No,
so you've not had anything where you know you've sent them to the wrong place or anything like that. You've always managed to get them to the right place at least.
Touch wood, yeah. Lucy's always ended up where she needed to go. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, we've had some stories with visas and things like that. But apart from that, no, luckily it's been all right, actually. It's
Oh, that's
touch wood.
lovely.
Yeah.
I sort of obviously, have made tons of mistakes in my career, and one of the things that I still get the chills about is just every time I press send on an email, just in case I've sent it to the wrong person, or and so that I always think to myself, God, if someone was managing my inbox, how would I feel? Would I be absolutely confident that they wouldn't just be sending it to the wrong person?
Definitely. I think it's as I said before, I make mistakes. I hold my hands up. I'm not perfect. No one is. And, it helps to build who and how you are, as long as you learn from the mistake. And if I make a big mistake, or luckily I've not made any huge mistakes, touch wood. But if I do make any mistakes, I'll go to Lucy and I'll say, look, I've done this. And she'll say, no, thank you for telling me. It's not the end of the world. Or obviously, if you,
it might feel like it at the time,
yeah.
but it's not, is it? It really isn't in the grand scheme of things.
It's not.
And what do you do to unwind? Like when you're not working, it's such a globe, obviously the global time zones, the pressure of what you guys do, and the pace that Lucy works at. I know how, I've got to know Lucy quite well over the last few months, and I can see how she works, and keeping up with her must be, must require you to always be on the top of your game. What do you do to just chill out?
I'm quite lucky with Lucy that we have a thing we spoke about a while ago, that unless I'm really needed in the evenings or anything like that, I won't come online. So I say to Lucy, look, we had a chat a while ago, because it was getting to the point, where, especially around events and things like that, it gets busy, and we were probably doing 12, 14-hour days. And, it's just how it is sometimes. And I was finding that I wasn't spending as much time with my wife and, at home. And me and Lucy said, like, right, between the hours of, say, 8 a.m. till 6 p.m., that's when I'll be online. And if you need me after that, you just let me know if it's anything urgent. So it's great that we've got that relationship. And I think switching off, my things are, I'm a huge geek. Doctor Who, Star Wars, Lego, anything like that. That is my relaxation time.
Did you see that Lego is the most subscribed, or Lego's YouTube channel is the most watched YouTube channel in the world?
I didn't know that, but I can imagine it. Yeah, it's it's a relaxing thing to just sit there and build something and then destroy it and build it again.
So lots of as you describe it, as geeky things. I mean, I just think, I guess it's what you make of it, right? I'm
a geek and proud of it. I hold my hands up.
There's nothing wrong with it. I think we all are, and I think the way the world's going with like tech and stuff, I think we're all
definitely
gonna have to embrace our inner geek and desire to learn that sort of stuff. And do you like reading? Do you read anything or listen to music?
Going back to the comic book geekiness, comic books are one thing I read. I'm not the biggest fan of books. Obviously, I do read books that we get from our authors and books within the industry, but outside of that, I don't really do a lot of reading, if I'm honest with you.
That's fair. That's all right. And what about music?
Oh, music. Yeah, I quite like music. I'm more of I don't have a specific type of music I like. It's more if I like the sound of something, I'll just listen to it to death. But yeah, if I've had a long day, I'll normally go out for a walk and stick my earphones in and just stick some Spotify on or something and just have a walk around.
That's nice. And you live, obviously, you said you've got a field at the back of your house. So you obviously live near quite a lot of green space, which helps.
Yeah, we've got the field out the back, and then we're about a 10-minute drive from the beach. So it's nice to just go and, have a walk down there at the end of the day.
That's amazing. And Matthew, if someone's listening to this and they're thinking about starting a career, let's say they're, thinking about starting a career in executive support, they don't know what it can lead to, and they're unsure about what the first steps are that they should take into pursuing this. Like, what would be your top tip? Like, what do you think, what advice would you give them?
I would say definitely go for it 100%. It's an industry that isn't given enough the credit it should be given. You know, the things we do as assistants are absolutely amazing. We are amazing, talented people. And I think it will be an amazing choice for you to join this industry. Okay, as we said before, industry is unfortunately stereotyped by some people. It's not like that anymore. You know, if you want to get involved, definitely look online, look at industry leaders. There are so many out there, and especially through this pandemic, there have been so many leaders and trainers that have offered so much free training. So definitely take up on that. You know, even if you watch one a day or whatever it might be, reach out to these people, explain why you want to do it and your previous skill set, see if they think it's a good idea. Even if you reach out to people like myself who already are assistants and have a chat with us, you know, that's what I love about this industry. It's like a family, you know, everybody is more than happy to talk to you. We're more than happy to give you some advice, that we're more than happy to give you some pointers and tips. Just do it, you know, and when you get into the industry, one thing I would definitely say is just be yourself. You know, you get so many people that come on and they unfortunately try to put on this facade and try to be something they're not. And it doesn't necessarily work long time. Just be yourself. That's what I've always said with me, you know, probably like Marmite. Some people like me, some people don't like me, and that's up to them. You know, I'm not going to change who I am. I'm going to do my job. As long as Lucy's happy and the people around me are happy, that's all that matters. You know, as long as you're doing what's right for you, your executive, the company, yourself, and those closest to you, that's all that matters.
And what would you say to any men listening that are thinking about, you know, thinking about making the move into this career? What would you say to them?
Come and join us, you know, come and join the other amazing male assistants within this industry. You know, it's an industry that is so rewarding. You know, it gives so much back when you give so much to it. Definitely do it. You know, if you want to have a chat with me, or I can put you in contact with other men within the industry, something you're looking to get involved with, we'll be more than happy to go over it with you and just see what you think.
That's awesome. And I think, you know, I agree with you that one of the great things about being an executive assistant is the power of the network and just tapping into that to help you progress and develop. It's really rewarding. And when you start sort of putting yourself out there a little bit and asking questions, what you'll get back, everyone naturally, you know, people who are executive assistants generally like to help and want to make things work, you know, and they want to see things through from start to finish. So, you know, you can really use that for your own benefit as well as for helping others, right? You know,
definitely. And now with social media, it's at your fingertips. You know, there's so many free webinars and articles and things like that that can just obviously most of us are still at home with the pandemic, and it's something you can do from your fingertips wherever you are in the world. So do take advantage of it if you can.
And what do you see the future looking like for this industry and for executive support professionals in like a post-COVID world? What do you think it's going to look like?
I can see a lot of changes happening. I can only see it getting stronger. I think, like with other industries, I think a lot of offices are going to probably go more to remote working. I can see a lot of companies maybe starting to go down the route of VAs, taking on VAs. I think it's been a real learning curve for everyone. I think once everybody starts to go back into the offices, there's going to probably be a lot of procedures that are going to have to be put in place, especially, you know, just in case this does ever happen again. You know, there's talk that, God forbid, that there might be a second wave in a couple of months when winter hits. And if that happens, you know, we might just start to get back to normality, and then it's going to happen again. So I think, you know, I was reading an article or it was an image or whatever it was the other day about how companies got it so wrong 5 years ago when they were interviewing people saying, where do you see yourself in 5 years? You know, no one could have guessed this was going to happen. And you're never going to guess what's going to happen down the road. You just got to be prepared for every and any outcome that you can be prepared for.
Yeah, totally agree. I think that's really good advice. Just do the best you can right here, right now. Definitely think about the long term. Have the long term vision, which is motivating and inspires you, and you have something to aspire towards. But you know, just do the best you can right here, right now. I agree, because we just don't know what it's going to look like. Well, thanks so much, Matthew, for coming on the show. It's been so great listening to your story, and I'm sure so many people are going to be inspired by, you know, what you've dealt with personally, but also how you've built your career and how you've become, you know, such an influential assistant in the world's, you know, global industry and voice of this industry. It's really amazing. You should be really proud of yourself. And yeah, what are you going to do for the rest of the day? Have you got a busy day planned?
Yeah, we've got our event Exec Tech coming up in September, so we're just getting ready for that. It's 2 days of tech training, so I can send you some details afterwards. But watch this space. We're going to be starting to announce speakers shortly.
Amazing, absolute must for anybody. I think probably send myself on it, to be honest. I think tech skills are the absolute must have in this world right now. You know, for anybody. I'll look forward to those details, and I'll obviously, you know, I'll link up your profile in the podcast, and people can reach out to you and connect with you. And I'm sure you'll hear lots of people that were inspired by you sharing your story. So thanks again, Matthew. And have a really
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.